Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. To my bed crimers, hello all of you, how are you doing? To anyone new here, a warm welcome. Thank you for checking out my channel. Let me just ask you that after listening to or watching the video, if you find you enjoyed it or learned something, do me a favor, smash the like button. Now, let's get started. What a week it's been in the Alex Murdaugh trial. In case you aren't aware, Alex Murdaugh is the disgraced lawyer who's on trial in South Carolina for the brutal deaths of his wife, 52-year-old Margaret, and his son, 22-year-old Paul, on the night of June 7th, 2021, at the family's Moselle property. The prosecution is building a case based on circumstantial evidence, and the prosecutors have narrowed the time of Paul and Margaret's deaths to right around 8:50 p.m. As of the end of this week, a total of 5 people who knew the Murdaughs well now say that the third voice on Paul's Snapchat video made at 8:44 p.m. on the night of the crime was 100% Alex Murdaugh. That puts Alex at the scene of the crime, the dog kennels, about 6 minutes before Paul and Margaret were ambushed. 8:50 p.m. is when both victims stopped using their cell phones to make and receive calls. We know for a fact Alex Murdaugh was at Moselle until 9:06 p.m., at which time he started up his truck, took it out of park, and it is believed he headed to his parents. On Friday, FBI Supervisory Special Agent Matthew Wild, who supervises agents with the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, otherwise known as the CAST team, was on the stand. Wild shared that between 7:45 p.m. and 7:56 p.m., Paul Murdaugh's phone was close to the Moselle dog kennels. Then, Paul's phone arrived at the main house by 8:14 p.m. The family ate dinner together, starting at 8:15 p.m. roundabout. Then, 15 minutes later, yes, like the rest of us, it sounds like the Murdaughs ate their dinner in a very short amount of time. At 8:38 p.m., Paul's phone was back at the dog kennels, and it did not leave that location until investigators took it into custody. We know Paul made the Snapchat video at 8:44 p.m., and then he stopped communicating with his friend Rogan Gibson. As for Margaret's cell phone, the experts said that it was in the West Ashley area of Charleston between 4:25 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. The device then began traveling west toward Walterboro. It pinged off a tower there at 7:50 p.m., and that was the last cell tower hit from Margaret's phone. Onto Alex Murdaugh's phone. Where was his phone during that critical period around 8:50 p.m.? So Alex's cellular data showed that he was in the area of his Hampton law firm between 4:10 p.m. and 6:25 p.m. After that, his cell phone remained around Moselle from 6:40 p.m. to 9:10 p.m. Alex's phone then pinged at 9:12 p.m. and 9:18 p.m. from a different cell tower that was still near Moselle but closer to Varnville. Alex's parents' house is in Varnville. Between 9:20 p.m. and 9:46 p.m., which is when it would appear that his truck was in park at his parents' Alameda house, the phone pinged to a sector facing toward the Alameda address. By 9:52 p.m. and 59 seconds, Alex's phone hit off a cell tower closer to Varnville. When Alex placed the 911 call at 10:06 p.m. and 31 seconds, it hit off the tower closer to Varnville, but the experts said Alex's phone could still have been at the family home, Moselle, and by 10:17 p.m., Alex's phone hit off the tower closest to Moselle. The first responder arrived at Moselle at 9:29 p.m. Car experts who were able to unlock the car's OnStar system shared data which can show when the car was in park and when it was out of park, meaning that it was driving. Their analysis indicated that Alex was most likely at his parents' house for only 20 minutes, June 7th, and not the 30 to 40 minutes he told investigators he was there. The 20-minute time frame was further supported by Alex's mother's caretaker, Shelley Smith. Smith shared that Alex told her that he was at his parents' house for 30 to 40 minutes, and the way he said it made it sound like he was saying, "And you better tell the police the same thing." Thankfully, Smith, although she looked terrified on the stand in my opinion, appears to be an honest person, and she stuck to her story that Alex was only at the house for 20 minutes. Then, on Friday, we also heard from the Murdaughs' housekeeper, Blanca Terubiat Simpson. Blanca told the court that Margaret said to her that she was concerned about money before her death and about whether Alex was being truthful in what he was telling her about the boat crash lawsuit she and Alex were facing in connection to their son's 2019 boat crash. Margaret told Blanca that the lawyers were asking for $30 million and also said that she and Alex didn't have that kind of money. Per Blanca, Margaret was crying as she talked about this. She told Blanca that she'd willingly hand over the funds to the victims and their families if she had the money, and she would gladly start all over building their wealth. But that wasn't a possibility. What this underscores is how much of a financial burden and stressor Paul's boat crash was on Alex and Margaret. Blanca testified that early on the morning after the crime, Alex called her to tell her what happened to Margaret and Paul. Later that same day, Alex asked Blanca to go to Moselle and to, and I quote, "straighten stuff up the way Maggie liked stuff because you knew her best," end quote. Imagine that. His wife and son had just died in a most brutal manner, and Alex Murdaugh is sending their housekeeper, a lady who was friends with Margaret, up to the house to tidy it up. If Murdaugh is found guilty, this sounds like an attempt to ensure that the house was contaminated. Moselle was potentially part of the crime scene, even though Paul and Margaret died down at the kennels. No one except the crime scene analysts should have been in that house at that point. And if Murdaugh was truly concerned that someone else harmed his wife and son, then why wasn't he concerned about keeping all the crime scenes at Moselle intact for law enforcement? Anyone looking for a criminal, especially if they're an attorney, is going to say, don't go in the house, don't touch anything. Also, Blanca, as I said, was a friend of Margaret's. Why send her to the property where her friend just died a most horrific death the day before? That's cruel. Blanca also talked about what Alex Murdaugh was wearing on the morning of June 7th. She said he left home wearing khaki pants, a seafoam-colored polo shirt, a blue suit jacket, and a pair of brown shoes. Blanca remembered the polo shirt distinctly because she adjusted the collar for Alex before he left. But let's get back to the day after the crime. While at the Moselle house, Blanca immediately noticed some irregularities, including a pot put away in the refrigerator with its lid. Margaret normally left the pots from dinner on the stove for Blanca to clean up the next day. This hints to someone cleaning up the kitchen after Paul and Margaret died. Was it Alec? It couldn't have been Paul or Margaret. It's also possible that one or more of Alec's colleagues who showed up at Moselle on the night of the crime and testified to being inside the house moved the pot. Outside the kitchen, in the middle of the doorway, Blanca saw Margaret's pajamas folded neatly on the floor with a pair of her underwear. According to Blanca, Margaret never wore underwear to bed, so basically those items looked staged. Then when Blanca went into the master bath, she found a damp towel on the floor near a puddle of water. A pair of Alex Murdaugh's khaki pants were crumpled on the floor. This implies that Alec took a shower the night before. Blanca said she then rinsed down the shower, picked up the pants, and washed them. Blanca stated that she did not see any blood on the pants or in the shower, but the seafoam-hued polo shirt was not there, nor were the brown shoes, and neither of those items were ever found, not by Blanca and not by the police. If Alec is the perpetrator, then I believe those are the clothes he wore during the ambush. I have a theory about Alec using the shower in the Moselle house. Let's just, for the sake of argument, assume he's guilty. I think that after he harmed Paul and Margaret, he stripped down to his birthday suit out there at the dog kennels, put the bloody clothes in maybe several heavy-duty garbage bags, rinsed himself off thoroughly with a hose out there near the dog kennels, dried himself off, and then went inside the house. Once inside, he took a quick but thorough shower, dried off, dropped the towel on the floor, found another pair of clean khaki pants to leave crumpled on the floor, put on the newly laundered white t-shirt, the green cargo shorts, and the loud red and yellow tennis shoes. Then he got into his truck with the bag of bloody clothes, and he dumped them or hid them somewhere, either on the way to his parents or on the way back. And that's how he was able to appear clean and blood-free post the crime. Blanca told the court that at the funeral for Margaret and Paul, Alec asked her and her husband to stay in Moselle's guest house for $1,500 a week so that they could keep an eye on the property. Blanca and her husband agreed. Then, in August of 2021, Alec came into the guest house and he asked Blanca to talk. Blanca told the court that Alec was pacing back and forth and said this, and I quote, "I got a bad feeling. Something's not right," end quote. Per Blanca, Alec then mentioned a video that was out, and he asked Blanca whether she remembered the Vineyard Vines shirt he was wearing the day of the crime. Blanca told the court that she was confused at first by Alec's statement because she remembered fixing the collar on his seafoam polo shirt on the day of the crime. Blanca was certain Alec wasn't wearing a Vinnie Vines shirt. She told the court, and I quote, "I didn't say anything, but I was kind of thrown back because I didn't remember that. I didn't know whether he was trying to get me to say, if I was to be asked, that that was the shirt he was wearing that day," end quote. What Blanca described there reminded me of what Alec's mother's caretaker, Shelley Simpson, said about Alec telling her how long he was at his parents' house on the night of the crime. He didn't ask her, he told her. This, in my opinion, is coercion. Blanca also described cleaning Margaret's car after her death and finding her wedding ring under the seat. This is very interesting. Who put Margaret's wedding ring under the seat? Was it Margaret? If so, why? Was it Alec? If so, why? Did he remove it from her while she lay deceased on the ground near the dog kennels? If so, why? Did he want to keep it for sentimental reasons? Was he fearful the investigators would take it as evidence? Or did he want to pawn it? Remember, he was in deep financial trouble at that point. Blanca also told the court that Alec had asked his wife and son to be at Moselle on the night of the crime. Margaret had said to Blanca in a text that Alec asked her to come to Moselle. Blanca said that Margaret did not like being at Moselle, especially in the summer. She preferred to stay at the family's beach home in Edisto, and Margaret had been staying at the Edisto beach house, redecorating it and getting it fixed up for a 4th of July party she was planning. Alec also coerced Paul to the property to clean it up in preparation for a hunting excursion. So in essence, Paul and Margaret were lured to Moselle that night. But Blanca also testified that Margaret was Alec's everything, that he adored her. This definitely supports the defense's stance that Alec was a loving man who could never harm his wife and son. The son of Murdaugh's former housekeeper and nanny, Gloria Satterfield, was also on the stand last week. You may recall that the Murdaughs told Gloria's son that his mother tripped over the family dog on the front steps of Moselle. Gloria died in the hospital about 4 weeks later from a head injury. She was never able to tell her sons or the police what happened to cause her to fall. Gloria's son testified to Alec never telling him about or handing over even a dime of the $4.3 million Murdaugh won in damages from his own insurance company. If anyone is a poster boy for Alex Murdaugh's immorality, it's this young man. By the way, the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division said they were going to exhume Gloria's body about a year after Margaret and Paul Murdaugh died. However, they never announced their findings, and they never announced the reopening of the investigation into Satterfield's death. Thus, it's unclear where all of that stands right now. Gloria's son's lawyer, Eric Bland, has stated that the boys do not suspect foul play was at work in their mother's fall. Now, here's probably the most interesting thing that happened in the courtroom this week. Alec's son Buster got himself in hot water with the court when he was captured on camera giving attorney Mark Tinsley what appeared to be the finger, along with one of those "if looks could kill" stares. Take a look at the photo. This gesture got Buster kicked out of his front rowish seats, and he was forced to sit more toward the back of the courtroom. When Buster was asked to move, he kicked a bottle of water in anger. I believe Buster's crude gesture, dirty look, and angry behavior are due to two things. One, I think Buster is frustrated and angry about his mother and brother's deaths and the utter destruction of his family life as he knew it. The family's reputation is in tatters. The Moselle property is up for sale, as is the Edisto Beach House, and Buster is no longer living on Easy Street. Buster can't vent on his father because his dad's in jail, and he's also the guy who paid and maybe still pays the bills. Alec is also Buster's only parent at this point. Alec has also been trying to get Buster readmitted to law school. You see, Buster was kicked out of law school for plagiarizing. Can we blame Buster for plagiarizing when his father was breaking so many rules himself? Alec was, in my opinion, a crap role model for his sons. The second reason I believe Buster made that gesture is because attorney Mark Tinsley was on the stand at the time. That gesture was directed at Tinsley. Tinsley represents the victims of Paul Murdaugh's boat crash, and Tinsley is the guy who decided to go after the Murdaugh family's personal finances after being told in November of 2020 that Alex Murdaugh, a personal injury attorney with a vibrant practice, was broke. The attorney said that he knew Murdaugh's law firm made substantial money, and that his family, the Murdaughs, had generational wealth. Tinsley said, and I quote, "There wasn't any way that he could be broke. He's actively settling cases, big cases," end quote. When asked about the sum he was seeking from Murdaugh, Tinsley said it became a matter of professional integrity for him to try and get as much money for the Beach family as possible. Tinsley pointed out that the evidence against Alex, Margaret, and Buster Murdaugh was damning. He pointed out that Alex and Margaret had been negligent in allowing their underage son Paul to drive the family boat under the influence of alcohol. Tinsley also pointed out that Paul had used Buster's ID to purchase booze on the day of the crash, and Paul had used his mother's credit card to pay for it. Tinsley said that if he simply took the insurance money payout for the Beaches, which would have been around $500,000, without personally pursuing Alex Murdaugh, then it would appear that there was a fix-on, meaning that Tinsley was being maybe paid off not to fight. Tinsley also described Alex coming up to him at a professional event after learning that he was going to go after him personally for a large amount of money and saying to him, "Hey, Bo, what's this I'm hearing about you saying? I thought we were friends," end quote. Tinsley interpreted this as an attempt to intimidate and bully him into backing off. Note that a hearing for disclosure on Alex and Margaret's finances was due to take place on June 10th of 2021, 3 days after Paul and Margaret died. Had that hearing occurred, Alex's financial crimes and all his misdealings would have been exposed to everyone, including his own law firm. To Alex, this would have likely meant losing his position at the firm and being disbarred. Being disbarred would have meant he could no longer practice the law and no longer bring in the big bucks. Personally, I believe Paul's boat crash, in which Mallory Beach died, is the match that lit the fuse to Paul and Margaret's deaths. Alex likely felt he was about to lose all his money, his properties, etc. There are also rumors that Margaret had met with a divorce attorney prior to her death, and that she had also hired a forensic accountant to review her husband's financial situation. So yes, for Alex, someone who seems to have a troubled mind, a total lack of moral compass, and a lust for money, all these things could have led him to sacrifice his wife and son on June 7th. He was desperate to gain time to find a way to cover up his financial misdeeds, in my opinion. He did not want to lose his situation. Back to Buster's finger gesture. Tinsley also went after Buster for allegedly giving Paul his ID. Paul, using Buster's ID to buy booze on the day of the boat crash, put Buster on Tinsley's radar. In fact, Buster recently settled with the Beach family and 2 surviving boat crash victims. meaning Buster had to cough up a lot of cash to pay for the victims of his brother Paul's fatal boat crash. Buster ended up handing over something like $250,000 out of his own inheritance from his mother's estate. So I suspect Buster is royally pissed off at Tinsley, and the gesture and the look of incandescent rage were Buster's only way of getting back at Tinsley in that moment. I'm conflicted when it comes to Buster. I feel very bad that he lost his mother and brother, but I'm also aware that there are rumors floating around that he might have some connection to a young man named Stephen Smith to his death. If you're interested in learning more about that, check out the other videos in my Murdaugh playlist. Tinsley is the person who set in motion the meeting that was supposed to occur on June 10th, in which all of Alex's finances were going to be discussed and exposed. All of those things happened anyway because of Paul and Maggie's untimely deaths. But back on June 7th of 2021, I believe Alec thought he could still find a way to avoid being found out for his financial misdeeds, but he needed time, more time, and by allegedly taking Paul and Margaret's lives, Alec likely knew that the meeting scheduled for June 10th would be canceled, which it was. In this way, he would gain the all-important time that he needed to find cash to pay off all the debts. By the way, one of the boat crash victims, Connor Cook, he's had his lawyer sitting in on the trial every day. That attorney, when asked on court TV what he's noticed about the jurors, whom the rest of us can't see, said that they appear at times deeply interested, at other times bored, and at still other times frustrated. I'm sure the length of the trial, combined with some of the very technical conversations about cellular data and such, are very tiring. Note that per this attorney, those jurors have not been allowed to take notes during the trial, and that was at the behest of the judge. For some reason, the judge didn't want them taking notes. Now, if I were on that jury, I would be totally frustrated at not being allowed to jot down notes, particularly about the cell phone data, the analysis of when Alex Murdaugh's vehicle was in and out of park on June 7th, and the information shared by the caretaker, Shelley Smith, as to what she observed at Murdaugh's parents' house on the night of June 7th and in the days following it. How are these people supposed to be able to present arguments among themselves once they're alone deliberating as to whether they believe Murdaugh to be guilty or not? I believe a verdict in any case comes down to how each juror interprets the evidence. In South Carolina, those 12 jurors have to be unanimous to find Alex Murdaugh guilty. Are there any good old boys on the jury who will sympathize with Alec and say they can't believe that he's capable of doing that to his wife and son? How will jurors who believe in Murdaugh's guilt counter those good old boys? Next week, we may see Buster take the stand, as well as Eddie Smith, the guy who allegedly participated in Alex Murdaugh's failed attempt to have Smith do him in so that Buster could get $10 million in insurance monies. Stay tuned, because it's about to get even more wild and fascinating. Oh, what a Southern Gothic tale this is. Money, corruption, lies, betrayal. A screenwriter could not have made up a more riveting tale. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories. Hey, do me a favor. Smash that like button. Leave me a comment. Subscribe to the channel, consider a membership, and I'll see you next time.